once we got back to the dorm, I stood outside in line as the deputies took turns going down the line to do a count to make sure none of us had ran off from chow hall back to the dorm. And when they let us back in, I headed back up to my cubby and tried to lay down and take a nap. When I woke up, it was time to go down to the day room. And this was the day that Amy was going to help me with the commissary. So I had $125 in my account that I was going to use for food, shampoo, deodorant, soap, and she was going to help me in exchange for a candy bar. It had been a week since I had been able to use deodorant or a bar of soap. And I was, used to taking that hot shower every morning when I got up and using soap, and sometimes every night before I went to bed. And I really had counted on one hand the number of showers I had had in a week. I think at this point it had been around 3 showers. And I knew that when I started ordering, I was going to try to get some stuff with some protein. I peeked over my cubby into Linton's, and she was still passed out. And I still didn't know what she was in there for. And anyway, so day room was open, and I went running down those stairs in my broke orange flip-flop, and I just I ran down to the phones like I always did in the holding cell. It was the same deal. I was on the second tier, so I had to run to get to the phones, and this time it was a bit of a challenge. There were 6 phones because there was a lot more women in this dorm, and they were in there pretty much full time. So they weren't like, people in holding cells sick or out a whole bunch of people in court. So everybody wanted to fight over those phones. And when I got up to the phone and I went to use it to call home and call my sister, call my dad, Linton had come down there just screaming and going off. Like, I need to use the phone. When they arrested me, I was in an Airbnb and my dog's left behind. I've got to get somebody to check on my dog. I mean, she was just frantic. And so with all that disruption, I hung the phone up. I mean, it was just causing fights and upset. And the officer said, okay, I'm going to put a stop to this. There's going to be a list of names on taped on the phones, and you can sign in and everybody can go in order. Well, that didn't go over too well. I mean, there was just a badass girl that had been walking around since I'd been there, and she looked at the list and she was cussing about the rules and like, what the fuck is this shit? I've been here for a long time and we've never had a problem with the phones until this bitch. Fuck this bitch. And it was phones, TVs, just things that people wanted in there and needed. And, you had everybody, trying to share just a few things. And so anyway, I sat down across from the TV. It's the first time I'd really sat and looked at a TV since I'd been there. And I actually started meeting some of the women and hearing some of their stories. And for a week, my main goal was to let me out of that cubby or let me out of the cell so I could get to the phones. And I wanted to be on the phone as long as I could. Whoever would take a collect call, I was calling them. So I had this young girl sitting next to me when I was watching TV with the other inmates, and she was real skinny, dirty blonde hair, but she carried herself well. I mean, you could tell that she'd, come from a good place. And she said, "Hey, I'm Allison." And I said, "Hey," I'm Britt. And she said, "If you're hungry," she said, "let me know." She said, "I have some extra food." And she said, "I know what it's like to be in here new and be starving." And I just began to cry so hard because I had not eaten enough. And I had just this huge dose of anxiety, and I gladly accepted her offer. So Allison got up, she walked over to her cubby, and she came back with a bag of wheat thins. And, it's kind of like if you go abroad and you're eating their food, and then you get on the plane or you come back into America and you're craving Burger King or any kind of fast food you can get. It was sort of that same feeling, but with a lot of hunger added on to it. It was just like, oh my gosh, American food, wheat thins. It was some kind of brand name that I was finally getting to eat. So yeah, I was stuffing my face with food, and it was kind of hard to talk with a mouthful of wheat thins. But anyway, she said, what are you in here for? And this is always a conversation with a new inmate, or if you're a new inmate and you're meeting someone, it's kind of reminds you in the South when you meet someone, they're like, hey, what church you go to? So anyway, she asked me, and I just told her that, my grandparents had pretty much raised me, and I took care of my grandmother, who had dementia for 3 years. And I had been dating a girl during that time. And when I broke up with her, she called my grandmother, who had dementia, and told her that I'd been stealing. And, then I went on to tell her a little bit more that I had power of attorney and I had permission to do those things. And that's this. And then I was like, what about you? Why are you in here? And she said, I've been on prescription pills since I was a kid. And she said, I'm 22 now. And she said, I've struggled my whole life trying to get off of them because I've been on them so long. And she said, I was in a car accident where I killed a person. And she said, and I'm still waiting for my trial in April. She went on to say, I have a good attorney and support. And she said, I hope I get out of here. And it just took a heart-wrenching story like that for me to take the focus off of my own stuff and be there for a girl who was younger than my son, and that her life was ruined all because a doctor had been prescribing her pills that she had permission to take, and then she ended up, abusing them or taking too many. And, there you've got two different families who's been affected in a very painful way. You've got her who's hit and killed someone by accident, and now she has this guilt on her, and she's 22 and looking at a very long prison sentence. And then you have the woman who was, that was hit and killed, and their family, and then now they're lost. And so I was glad that she had a loving family and support. And I walked over to the list where the phones were, and I just thought, okay, it's time for me to order, my commissary. So I started looking around the day room for Amy to help me, and I saw her over the table playing cards with some of the other inmates. And I said, are you ready to, help me order? And she said, yeah, sure. She said, I'll be over there in just a second. And so she said, let me help you. So I sat down at this computer screen, and it was part of the phone, and you could order on Wednesdays and Sundays. And the night that, like the next night after you ordered, you received your things. And so I had got, tuna, tortillas, peanut butter packets, chips, some cookies, some shampoo, some Dove soap, deodorant. And there was like a bunch of sugary stuff, but I wanted to try to stay away from that as much as possible. And so I had ordered like $70 in no time. And I just couldn't imagine being so poor and being in jail and not being able to get on that list or get anything extra. So then I let Amy pick out a candy bar, and she smiled, and I thanked her for helping me. And so later I asked somebody, well, what happens if you get your commissary as you're leaving, or if you like if you leave and then it comes at night. And they said, well, they'll just refund the money back to you. So I was already looking around. I was like, well, if I get my stuff and then I get to get out of here, I'll just give it to somebody who doesn't have anything. And after a week, I started learning that the jail system's a very profitable business. The cost to call your loved ones, to get extra food, hygiene products, and stamps for letters was impossible for poor families. And then they would have to take out these high interest loans in order to pay for bail money. And then there were some that were sitting in jail because they didn't have $250 to bail out for some minor charge. And they would be in there to a court hearing. And so after doing some research, I learned that prison companies are expected to make $1 billion in revenue this year from families sending money. And the United States has one of the highest number of incarcerated citizens than any other country in the world, next to Russia. So when I would lay there and think about the other women in there with me, I could only imagine what all this was triggering and the traumas that they grew up in as a child. This was not a place to reform a person. It was a place for wealth, for jail and prison owners, and it was a re-triggering process for women who had been traumatized as children. And it was disgusting. It is disgusting. And there's good. I'm not saying there's not good that comes out of there. There's people that come out of there like me, and I have a story. I have some hope to give somebody else, but there's a lot of people in there who don't. For whatever reason, I made it out. I made it alive, and I'm here to tell my story.